Hello, this is Natalie with Real Estate Investment Nomad Podcast. Today we're in Chicago with Sohail.
Yes.
And there's a fun fact about him. 20 plus years of experience in the Chicagoland area.
Yes.
Almost 2,000 deals
Almost
overall.
2,000 transactions.
That's amazing.
Yep.
And the reason that we're talking to him is because he's the top 1% here in Chicago. So I think we come with a lot of experience and we can't wait to hear about the Chicago market.
Yes, a lot of experience. I started in many different facets of the industry, from mortgages to condo conversion to development, now brokerage.
Amazing. So I think you've gone through every single stage of the real estate space.
Almost, yeah.
So let's talk about you first as a person, because I would love to hear more about you, your personal experience. How long have you been in the market yourself?
Yeah, absolutely.
And
so
how do you like it?
Sounds good. So I started in 2005 on the mortgage side. And from 2005 to 2007, I was doing just mortgages. And then I got my real estate license. In towards the end of 2007, the only real estate I was really doing was people that were coming to us for the mortgages that wanted to get pre-qualified first, and then they needed an agent. So I was helping them there. And then with the condo conversions, that's where my license came in handy, because I had a partner in the mortgage company. And when we started working with the developers and condo conversions, I had my license. So he would handle the mortgage side. I would handle the real estate side, even though we split everything 50-50. And then we were part of the development team as well. So it was good times. In 2008, when the market crashed, I got out of the mortgage company because my partner and I started having disagreements. And I got involved with another partner in a real estate brokerage. Okay. And that was, it was called Rent Smart Chicago. It was actually called Smart Worldwide. And we had a sales division called Smart Property. And then we had a rental division called Rent Smart Chicago. But the rental division took off because that's when the market crashed and there wasn't that many sales. And we went from one location with 3 people to 6 locations, over 300 people by 2010. We were doing good. We were averaging over 100 leases a week. It was very good. Profit was really strong. And then in 2010, things started changing. I wasn't getting along with the partners I was with. And then by 2011, 2012, we shut that down, and then I went to work at Jameson Sotheby's. I was there for 2 years, and then from there I went to App Properties in 2014, and then in 2023 I came to EXP, and I'm going on my 4th year with EXP.
That's awesome. So you've been shifting around based on the market and adapting.
Based on the market, important. Yes, yeah, you have to adapt, right? And the human body is made to adapt to anything. We, as realtors, through our mindset, need to adapt to everything, right? Because the market is constantly shifting and it's constantly changing, no matter where you're at.
Yeah, I mean, because of the experience that you had, and we, were in an event together, and I think you guys are doing an amazing job on the selling side of production. Many agents out there are thinking, I wish I can, work like you, but it's like the endurance. What's your secret that you will say, like for those agents looking at this interview? And then eventually going to be coming into the investment side, which is my favorite part. But for those agents out there that are like looking at you with almost 100 transactions per year, how do you do it? And then sometimes you work as just with your assistants, as you mentioned.
Yeah. So the key, so I'll kind of tell you, I'll use myself as an example. So in 2012, I did 10 transactions, and then a bunch of I did some rentals. And then I hired a coach who taught me how to prospect. Once I learned how to prospect in 2013, I did over 100 transactions because he developed the skills on how to be an effective communicator. And through those skills, I then knew how to go after the business. And once I started learning how to go after business, acquisition of clients was my main purpose. And that's what I focus on since then, was just the acquisition of new business. And then I slowly added people to my team to handle the business. So I was on the side of bringing in new business, and then the team was on the side of making sure everything sold, and then the clients were handled properly, and the service was there.
Yeah, because 100 transactions is almost like 2 per week, right? Like it's like moving quickly.
It's moving. It's moving quickly. Yeah. There was actually a time in my career where I worked 7 years, 7 days straight.
Wow.
Yeah.
So for those on take vacation, it's like Hormozy. Hormozy doesn't take vacations, and they're like, go.
I just went.
Obsessed.
Yeah. But it's the law of momentum, right? An object in motion stays in motion unless acted upon outside force. It's like Maslow's, right, laws?
Yeah.
And so I just kept going. because that's how I built the momentum. And then once I got to the point where I had a small team, then I could do the vacations and then I could spend more time with my family and all of those things.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And since you've been in Chicago for so long and you know the market very well, there are many, the investors that look at the US as an investment, location to park their money in dollars. It's a safe market. It's been growing year over year. Of course, we have crashes,
Yes,
here and there
yes.
because it's natural way the market moves. But we target a lot of, our viewers are mostly thinking to invest abroad, meaning abroad from the US to another country or from another country into the US.
Right.
They always look at Florida as a destination, Arizona sometimes as a destination because maybe that's the only areas they know. But they, I think, overlook Chicago because it's cold or they don't know the market and they just don't understand it. For those people out there that are thinking about Chicago as an investment, place, what would you recommend them? They start looking at certain type of properties or returns? What would be
Yes,
your
yes.
experience?
So from an investor perspective, I highly recommend multifamily because multifamily, it's safer, right? You have more doors under one roof. So the more apartments you have in the same building, it's a better investment because if one goes vacant, you still have, depending on how many apartments you have, but if one goes vacant, it doesn't hurt as much as if it was a single family home and then the tenant moved out and then you have months of just no income.
Yeah.
Right? So for the long-term investment, buildings are always the best, right? And then what's nice about the Chicagoland market is if you look over historically, year over year, going backwards, Chicago, even when the market crashed in 2008, Chicago only depreciated 25%, where Florida, Arizona, they depreciated 75%.
Wow.
Yeah, so Chicago doesn't have like the high ups and down swings. The other areas, which are very popular when they're hot, they're also very unpopular when they're not. Chicago's pretty steady, right? You have just a little bit of ebbs and flows where Arizona, for example, that market goes up 75% and then it drops 75%. So Chicago is a little bit of a long-term, safer investment. If you're looking for more of a high risk, then there's other areas like Miami, for example, right? But it's also very expensive,
right?
Which is where the risk comes in.
Yes, exactly. And many people don't understand maybe the Chicago market. And what would you say on the returns that you've seen in a multifamily? Let's say a three flat. They used to be like back in the day, maybe 300,000, 350. Now we're looking at probably 700, depending on the area. What would you be a good entry point from your perspective when it comes to investing here?
Yeah. So I always look at the return, not really how much the property costs. It's the return. So you want to look at what the income is, and then the expenses, and then you subtract the expenses from the income, and you want to have a net return. I would say, depending on the area, but anywhere from 6% up. I wouldn't go less than 6% because you can get a better return somewhere else.
Yeah.
And then also in the Chicagoland market, if it's an area that's not as desirable, you can get a better return, right? Your tenants are a little bit more difficult to deal with, but the returns can be anywhere from 12, 13, maybe even 20%.
Yeah.
But because again, it's the higher the risk, the higher the return.
Of course.
Yeah.
So which neighborhoods would you recommend for somebody who's starting? Because we have the different areas, the north side, the south side, the east, the west, and the suburbs, without touching the suburbs too much because, Chicago is big enough as is.
Yeah.
And I think when people want to invest in a market, they want to be close to the city and have that maybe, the short rental income, I don't know if that's, too popular these days because they're cutting down the licenses, but let's say long-term rentals.
Long-term rentals. So in terms of neighborhood in Chicago, the further you are from downtown, the cheaper the property, and then probably the better the returns. Now, the reason that people want to go close to downtown is because the appreciation is greater. But when you're buying a piece of real estate, like let's just say a 6-unit building, right? And as an investor, there's a lot of tax shelters and loopholes that people don't take into consideration. One of the things is like you buy the property, for example, let's say it's a 6-unit, and we'll just say it's in Jefferson Park or some of the outskirts of like downtown, but it's still in the city of Chicago. You can get, let's just say it's an 8% return, right? But then the one thing that other people don't think about is that you can accelerate the depreciation.
Mhm.
So if you have income that's attached to like the US where you're going to get taxed on it, a multi-unit building, you can accelerate the depreciation and that'll offset your taxes.
Mhm.
So a lot of people that I work with, they don't pay any taxes. Why? Because they just put the money that they would have to pay in taxes into a piece of real estate,
Okay.
which would offset their tax liability.
Mhm.
So now, let's say they made $1 million and they had to pay $300,000 in taxes. Instead of paying the 300, you can buy $1 million property, put 30% down, which is that 300,000, and then you can accelerate the depreciation. Take all 300,000 up front, and then you don't pay taxes. Then you have a building.
Wow. So
Yeah.
you just do that again and
Yeah.
again.
And then you just keep doing it.
Yeah.
I have, and many clients of mine, every year they just buy more and more real estate. That real estate that they put their money into offsets their tax liability.
Yeah.
And then every year they have more real estate. They're getting more passive income and they haven't paid taxes.
Yeah.
But here's the flip side of it. And this is where the long-term perspective comes in. Because if you sell it, you have to pay it all back.
The depreciation plus the capital gain.
Yes, capital gains plus the depreciation you took up front. So from a long-term perspective, I always focus on the long-term because long-term thinking gets you long-term results.
Mm-hmm.
Short-term thinking gets you short-term results.
Yeah.
So when you buy a building and you say, okay, I'm going to hold on to it for the long term, if you have children, you can keep it as a legacy component and pass it on to your children.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why you see some of these foundational families that have had a long history in the States be worth a ton of money because they just kept on collecting and collecting, and the properties grow bigger, their portfolio grows bigger and bigger, and the parents don't and then they pass it down to their children.
Mm-hmm.
And then the children don't sell it. They just keep holding on to it and it just grows bigger and bigger and bigger. And now you have a generation of wealth built by whoever started it and passed on to the kids.
Mm-hmm.
And now you have kids who are wealthy and sometimes they're set for life.
Yeah, no. That's a great deal to have your parents inherited some property.
Definitely.
For those the people from abroad, maybe they don't have credit here, but they do have maybe a hefty down payment. You that are in the finance industry, is there any loans that they can get as an international buyer? What would be the down payments and the process they need to follow? That it might be different from a U.S. citizen, but they still want to get their money out of the country. Let's say,
Yeah, there are some loans. I'm not an expert because I haven't really, but there are loans depending on if they have like a visa or some type of ability to buy here.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise, if you don't have that, then you can't get financed. You have to have a visa or some type of documentation that you can buy here.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're just an investor, you have nothing to do with the States, you don't come here, but you want to put your money somewhere safe, it would have to be cash.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The full property has to be cash.
Yeah, it would have to be cash. I mean, there might be some I'm just not aware of any.
Mm-hmm. And for those people that will be looking at those investments depending on the type of the property, but we can go over maybe some lending for international buyers because I do know they do it in Florida, but I don't know exactly how they do it.
Sure.
But for Chicago, for us, it's more like you were saying, make sure that you buy smartly where the location first is, and then check the returns. And with agents locally here, they can explain the numbers for each property because like blanket statement, all Lincoln Park is this much in income,
right?
And it also depends on the price of the property. Awesome. So for buyers that are they have the visa, you said they do have maybe options on the buying side, but I imagine the down payment must be heftier.
Yeah. You're probably looking at anytime from whether any investor that can buy here in financing, you need probably 30% down.
Mm-hmm. For the whole.
Yeah.
Okay. For the agents out there that are thinking, they're also investors, right? Like they're trying to they have the license, they understand the numbers, and they're local here. For us, has been very nice to be like, hey, we're in Chicago, it's cold here.
Right,
we get them to Mexico to buy there.
Right.
But when it's vice versa, I think it depends on the investment pool. And do you see anybody or any groups buying like a syndication, like a group of investors that come together and then buy the property either cash or do that benefit of the depreciation?
There's tons of syndication. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's tons of funds that people set up and syndicate. the best well-known is like Cardone Capital,
Yeah.
right?
We all know that one.
Yes, yeah. So that would be
How big
a
are they in
great.
Chicago here? Are they?
Well, he hasn't. Well, actually, he was going to buy a building here in the South Loop, but I don't know if he did or not. But Florida,
Yeah.
he has multiple properties there. So from an investor that doesn't want to touch the property, they just want to own it and get a return, and then have somebody manage it and take care of it, and they're looking at it from a pure investment standpoint. Something like a fund or syndication would be good for them because they don't get as high of return, but they also don't have to deal with the headaches,
Yeah.
right? Somebody
Sure.
else is dealing with the headaches, so
Sure.
that would be good.
Awesome. So for the price ranges that you work with, and what would be something that we can give the viewers an idea on how much you need to start in Chicago, and by
Sure.
area maybe, because
Yeah.
they're curious about the price. They're like, how much can I get for what? At least so I
Right.
can get my feet wet. Or
Yeah,
my first
yeah.
property.
So let's start like Jefferson Park.
Okay.
So Jefferson Park it's in the city of Chicago, but it's very close to the suburbs, right? It's on the border of, we'll just say, like Niles. Okay. So in Jefferson Park, you can probably buy a 3-4 unit anywhere from 6 to 800,000. The bigger the property, the higher. So if you're looking at like a 6 unit, you're probably at $1 million to 1.2 plus. And then if you go deeper into Chicago, so from Jefferson Park, let's say you were going to go to Portage Park, it probably goes up a little bit in price, right? Portage Park, you go to, we'll say Logan Square, it goes up in price.
Yeah.
Logan Square to Bucktown, it goes up in price. Bucktown to, we'll just say Lincoln Park, it goes up in price. Lincoln Park to downtown, it
So
goes
it's
up
like
in
the
price.
ladder of
Yes,
farther.
yeah. So think of it like a bullseye, right? Downtown Chicago is the bullseye, and then you have the circles going out. And so as you go away from downtown, the properties, the cost of the property, the returns, everything gets better, and taxes as well. The closer you get downtown, you get smaller returns. The properties are a lot more expensive, but the properties sometimes are more valuable. So there's two ways to look at it. One way is to look at the return, not the cost of the property. And another way to look at it is the cost of the property, because you're focused on appreciation. But I think most investors, appreciation is great, but from a real estate perspective, it's always best to like have that monthly return. And again, if you're going to keep it for the long term, then the appreciation is really not as important as making sure that you're getting rents that are going to consistently come through and then go up over time.
Right. Because now the rental market is really busy from what I know. That's two things I want to touch before we continue. But it will be like the taxes in Chicago, like by area too, because they're going up.
Taxes are going up,
and
yes.
also rental properties right now, like people need more homes to rent because maybe the affordability for qualifying for a loan is not as easy or no, as before. So from the rental side of things, how good, I mean, based on the same neighborhoods, the rentals they can expect based on the property value or return?
Yeah. I mean, rental return. So the further away from downtown, I always say that a good return is probably, I wouldn't go less than 6% cash on cash return. And I would probably want to go something closer to 8%. And then they go up from there. Now, if the further away you go from downtown, the better the returns, but the rents are much lower, right? But the properties are much cheaper, so you can get a better return. Where when you get closer to downtown, the rents are really high, but the property values to purchase them are very high. And so it's that kind of like, I think it's more of an individual basis, but from an investor perspective, it's always best to look at what the returns are going to be. Because if you never sell the property and you're going to keep it like a legacy and build a portfolio, then you never have to worry about the appreciation.
Right. For property taxes, have you seen the trends going up year over year?
Yes.
And how much is the percentage that you've seen, like in all your years of experience?
So in the Chicagoland market, I think over the last 6 years, we're up 30% on average, which is a pretty big increase.
Yeah.
But then again, the appreciation has also gone up, 30 to 50%, depending on the area. So rental income has gone up dramatically, right? And that's the nice thing about having an investment property, rental properties, is rentals are the natural equalizer against inflation. Why? Because when inflation goes up, rents automatically go up. So if you're an investor and you have high inflation, whether you have inflation where you live or inflation here, As inflation goes up, rents go up. So it just equals it out. Where if you didn't have the rental income and you just had some other type of income and inflation goes up, you're still at your set income. But when inflation goes up on rentals, the rentals go up. So you're always in a good position. Yeah.
That's good. I didn't think about that.
Yeah. It's the natural equalizer.
So then you don't worry too much about
You don't worry too much. If you
inflation.
have rental properties, yeah. Because rents have gone up dramatically. So just like property values have gone up, I think the cost of rentals have almost doubled depending on the area as well.
I've seen that.
Yeah.
I like talking about property taxes mostly because, for example, when I was my condo in the city, it's about 1,300 square feet, 3-bed, 2-bath, and the property taxes went in 1 year like from 4,500 to almost 7,000.
Yeah.
The 30% apply, I think, the same that 1 year.
That sounds like it.
But when we compare it to Mexico, the properties in different countries, many people that are investing need to know that taxes here, property taxes, are something you need to consider for your fixed cost, when it comes to your investment. But even after, the expensive property taxes, you still get that type of return here, right?
Yeah. Now,
after all expenses, so that you say is net, right?
You want to focus on the net. Yeah. So a lot of times people will market a property with the gross rental income.
Yeah.
But just like with our income, right? It doesn't matter how much you gross. It matters how much you walk away with in your pocket.
Right.
So you never want to buy a property where the expenses are too high because then they're going to eat up your returns.
Right.
So high income, minimize your expenses, and that is the winning factor for having a good property. That's the winning factor. Now, just to add to taxes, Chicago has high taxes. There's states that have very little taxes, Florida, Tennessee, and then there's countries that don't have any taxes, like Dubai, for example.
Yeah.
Right? Dubai doesn't have any taxes. So as an investor, if you have the ability to kind of go anywhere, maybe it's good to diversify and have like Chicago, maybe somewhere else in the States. And then if you're an international investor, you can go to other places. Dubai, for example, they're doing tons of development, right? And they don't have any taxes. They don't have income taxes. It's a very investor-friendly state, or a country, I should say. Chicago is like on the medium. And then if you go to like Tennessee, that's probably a really good place to invest because, again, very little property taxes. And then you could go to areas where, but I don't think they have many multifamily, but a lot of wealthy people like to live there. And those areas are Jackson Hole, right? That's I think they say that is the highest income per family is in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Yeah.
Wyoming.
Yeah.
Out of all places.
Out of all places right now.
I think it was like California or something like that. California, New York.
No, well, because they have high taxes, right? But I worked with a hedge fund manager. He owned a hedge fund, very wealthy individual, and he explained it to me. He had a place in Lake Forest, and he had and in Wyoming they don't have like a property; they have ranches.
Right, like
ranches, right? Big properties. But what's interesting is he said that if he spent the same money that he spent in Lake Forest, because of the taxes, he would pay it off in 6 years rather than 30, because the taxes were so high on his property versus Wyoming. There's very little taxes.
Right. Yeah. No, it's amazing to see because even within the U.S., they can diversify in different states, cities. For example, like when I was comparing the taxes and the same condo, let's say in Mexico, the one that you have in the city would be $500 a year. Yeah. So when people see that, they get like, whoa. That's when the diversification is super, super important. And comparing to different markets is hard to compare side by side. But, when you come to the net profit, then you get an idea on how much are your expenses versus your income. And hopefully we'll have you in Mexico soon as you move with,
with
the
absolutely.
team.
Yes.
And then your property taxes will be much less.
Right. And you have good weather year round. Yes.
So the only, I think, downside of Chicago will be the weather, but at the same time, I feel like people in Chicago are more resilient. When they're here for a reason, they're hardworking. I think nothing stops Chicagoans, when it comes to like business. And that's why I still like this city a lot. And I've been here for a number of years, but it's hard to be here in the winter.
It's hard. It can get very cold. Yeah. If you're not used to it, you have to get used to it.
And one point about that, on the liability side of things, many of the viewers might think in their countries it's not mandatory to have property insurance. Here is mandatory if you have a mortgage. what would be that expense that they need to factor in? In most cases, can be a percentage or a
property
number.
taxes?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if it's like a 3 to 6 unit building, you're talking 4,000 plus a year in taxes.
And what about
Insurance. I'm sorry, in insurance. Yeah, about 4,000 for like a 3 unit building. And the bigger the building, of course, the higher the insurance is going to cost.
And that's mandatory. If
Mandatory.
You have a mortgage.
If you have a mortgage, it's mandatory. If you don't have a mortgage, it should be self-mandatory.
Yeah.
Because if you have a fire or one of your tenants cause a fire, you're in trouble if you don't have insurance.
Right. So super important to keep that in mind on the fixed costs. HOA you won't have any unless if it's a building, but if you just buy a condo, that will be something to factor in for the expenses.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I think we learned a lot about Chicago. You have a huge amount of experience here for so many years. For anybody who will be looking for you online, where can they find you? What's the best channel to reach out to?
Yeah, I mean, they can Google me. My first name is Sohail, spelled Sohail. Last name is Salahuddin, Salahuddin. And then they'll find me.
You're everywhere.
Google, ChatGTP, right?
Everything.
Yeah.
Amazing. This was a great knowledge. So if you are interested in buying in Chicago or exploring the market in Chicago, we can reach out directly to Sohail. We can throw some numbers together so you can see the comparables. If you're thinking US as a destination, you just don't know where, we can do maybe 2 different states, then 2 different cities. And then that way you can, even with the same city in Chicago, it's so different from one range to the other. But there's still good opportunities. So if you guys have any questions, we'll be here. For anything else, we'll see you guys hopefully in Mexico.
Yeah, I love Mexico. So whether it's here or Mexico or somewhere else, if you're an investor, the bottom line is just focus on the net return, right?
That's important.
Yeah, unless you're a trophy property collector, which there's probably not many of us that just like the movie stars and stuff, they just buy properties to have them.
Yeah.
Because there are investors that do that.
Yeah.
They just look at a piece of property as a safety deposit box, and they just they're not too worried about the return, but they want to put their money somewhere safe. Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
And anywhere in the United States, I think just because of the way that the country's ran, the insurance, the government, the regulation, all that stuff kind of has an extra layer of protection on your money versus other countries where you may have a very corrupt government.
Yeah.
And they could just take your property. Yeah. Which does happen.
Yeah. True. So keep an eye on that.
Yes,
here is safe.
definitely.
They're going to take your property, just for the sake of it. And for sure you have different ways to invest creatively. Thank you so much, Sohail.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for joining us on the Real Estate Investment Nomad podcast. I hope today's episode has inspired you to explore new horizons in global real estate. Remember, the world is full of opportunities waiting to be discovered. And with the right insights, you can turn those opportunities into successful investments. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your feedback helps us bring you the best content possible. Don't forget to follow us in social media for more resources and updates. Until next time, my friends, this is Natalie Salas, encouraging you to think big, invest globally, and transform your real estate journey. Safe travels and happy investing.